the Suns. We got to talk about the Suns because I don't think people are talking about the Suns. Nobody is talking about the Suns. They get no respect. It's Rodney Dangerfield out here. And I really fully don't understand why it's like how good they are is just being taken for granted. And I feel like it's very weird. It's like people aren't buying into how good they are. And I don't fully understand it. It's like, oh, like, yeah, they're good. Let's go talk about the Warriors. And maybe it's just because they're not like a big market team, even though Phoenix is a pretty big market. It's just they're not a team that has the national consciousness on it. But they're third in defensive and offensive rating, and they have the number one net rating. They have the best record in the league by a mile. They're 58-14. There's a good chance that they'll be a 65-win team. Like 65-win teams usually win a championship, right? Like they should, by all of that, they should be by far the overwhelming championship favorites. Adding to how great they are is they're absolutely batshit crazy in crunch time. Per NBA in clutch time stats, they're 28-6. You say, oh, they got 6 losses in clutch moments. I go, yeah, but the point of a clutch game is that the score is really close. Like win probability is very much up in the air. You should be around 500 if you think about it when it's the clutch situation. When it's clutch time, their offensive rating is the best in the league at 128.7 points per game. Just on its own, that's probably going to make you a monster. But their defensive rating is third best in the league at 100. They outscore their opponents by plus 28.7 points per 100 possession in clutch moments. They have the clutch gene. And to hammer home how fucking crazy they've been, the Bucks are second in clutch net rating at plus 15. The gap between them and the Bucks is the difference between the Bucks in second and like the 15th best team in clutch time. They are in a league of their own. James, why don't people talk about the Suns as the overwhelming, when I say like overwhelming championship favorites, it's like there is no one else that even should really be in the conversation based upon all of this information. Yet it feels like that's not the case.
Yeah, I think it's simple, and I know I've said this at least to you before, but it's because they don't have like an unequivocal top 10 player. Like through certain lenses, Chris Paul may be a top 10 player, but they definitely don't have a top 5 player anyway, right?
Yeah.
But I have to admit that I have been wrong. Well, I mean, I don't know that yet, but I've been saying that I don't really buy them as serious contenders for that very reason, right? And at this point, man, I mean, if it walks like a bird and talks like a bird or whatever that expression is, right? Like
The duck.
58 wins at this point in the year, man. Top 3 offense and defense. Like they're quite clearly dead serious contenders. And I don't know if I could say overwhelming favorites at this point, just because, well, for the same reason that they don't have like a dominant player that can take over the game like some other teams do. Like if Philly clicks, then Philly could steamroll the playoffs for all we know, right? Or like maybe Milwaukee's been a little bit dormant because that championship malaise that tends to take teams over. But credit where it's due, man. The Suns team is a beast. It should come to nobody's surprise that they win the championship this year.
Yeah, so I actually don't know if the top 15 player thing, how true it is for one simple reason. One, since Chris Paul's been injured, they've gone 10-4. Obviously, it's not the pace that they established, but losing who we both consider their best player and them going 10-4 kind of tells you just how fucking good the rest of this roster is. And I've never been, and I've said it a million times, I'm not a huge Devin Booker fan. I think he's I think he's overrated. But the way he's played since Chris Paul got hurt makes me wonder if in a different environment, he would be a top 15 player. And the only reason that he's not is because he's sharing the offensive load with Chris Paul. So like in the first 51 games with Chris Paul, he has an offensive rating of 110. He's got a usage rate of 32.2%, 55.5% true shooting, and 20.9 assist rate. he also has a 50.9 effective field goal percentage, which takes out free throws. He had COVID, so he's only played 10 games without Chris Paul. But the dude boosts his offensive rating to 123. His true shooting goes to 638. Effective field goal percentage, 599. Assist percentage, 29.6%. It could just be that Devin Booker probably should be, for most teams, the offensive engine. And that's actually what he's best suited as. And playing off ball, maybe he isn't even getting his absolute best out of him, even though it's what's best for the team. What do you think about that possibility?
Well, yeah, first I want to say that one of the most interesting trends to me since he's been playing without Chris Paul is that his usage rate has gone down and his efficiency has gone up. That's really noteworthy. Like it's a big time credit to him. I would have expected his efficiency to dip a little and his usage to skyrocket, you know? Devin Booker's a really good young player. I am a fan. Like I like Booker. I think there's something very pure about his game that I don't know. I just like watching him play. I like the way he shoots the ball. Like aesthetically, I like him. You know.
Oh yeah, he's a great player to watch. That I think that's why I get bugged about people putting him in the superstar category. I'm like, you can be fun to watch without being one of the 15 best players.
Yeah, definitely. And I still wouldn't say I don't think he's probably a top 10 player. Although you make a case that you know maybe Paul's Paul being on the team limits him a little bit or holds him back a little bit. But one thing I really like about this Phoenix team is the synergy between Paul and Booker, because they're both good on-ball players and they're both good off-ball players, right? So it's like whoever's running the pick and roll, the other one knows how to run around those screens and space the floor for the guy, and they have a nice dynamic as a backcourt, and I really think that's the engine of this team. And then you know a strong pick and roll finisher in Aiden makes for a really cohesive team philosophy, which is something I've said about them before. Like there's a very coherent philosophy behind the Suns team. But as to whether, like, I would say that Booker probably still is not a top 15 player and definitely not a top 10 player.
Yeah, I don't think he's top 10 for sure. But I'm saying it seems to me like he's knocking, or he could be knocking, or even in the top 15, you know, that 11 through 15 range, if he was just running a team on his own. Yep. Because he would get the stats and get the touches. But that's what's weird. Is like his usage rate goes down, but like it feels like his usage rate goes up without Chris Paul. It's like a very interesting dynamic. I will say what's interesting. One of the reasons why I think the Suns are slept on is that their top to bottom depth is absolutely fucking insane. They have 7 players who've played 50 games for him this season with a greater than 1 box plus minus. Right? Like that's fucking nuts. Like people think, oh, 1 box plus minus, that's not that crazy. Like Jokic has like a 13.9. Sure. But like box score plus minus, like there's only so much box score plus minus to go around per game. The fact that you have 7 guys contributing at like a valuable level is absurd. And this is what I think really puts them in my championship number 1 favorite lock, stone cold lock of the century, is that they have 6 non-negative offensive box plus minus and defensive box plus minus players. They have 6 guys that are like basically two-way guys. And Aaron Holiday would apply, but he's only played 16 games with the Suns. But like, that's why I picked the Bucks to win the championship last year, because they had their best guys were two-way guys. They have 6 two-way guys. Like, that's just, it's like we look at Philly and we go, yeah, man, they have some great offensive players and some great defensive players. But outside of Embiid, who do they have that's a two-way guy? The Suns have 6. Yeah. The Suns fucking have 6.
Yeah. The Suns are almost like the inverse that way, because Philly has 2 players with like top 10 candidacy, right? But they're a very unbalanced team, right? And the Suns are the opposite. They don't have a superstar, but yeah, I mean, you look at this roster, almost every player is a two-way player. Like even without knowing the box plus minuses, like just going on reputation.
Yeah,
you know,
it's, and like that to me is what I think really is making me realize like they have to be considered the overwhelming favorite. It's just like you can't put them in a position where they have to sacrifice offense for defense or defense for offense. And that's such a huge advantage.
You know what else I like about this team? Just looking at the depth chart, like the second unit effectively replicates what the first unit does, right? Like DeAndre Ayton's sub is JaVale McGee, and then the third string is Bismack Biyombo, who's a great third string center. So it's like you get that rim runner, rim protector archetype in no matter what. And then you got Jay Crowder at the 4, and then his immediate backup is Torrey Craig, who's just like a slightly worse version of Jay Crowder. You know what I mean? The backup backcourt is not that great in terms of Payne and Shamit, but I think they stagger Paul and Booker a little bit, right? When they're healthy. Like, so they always have an engine on the floor, or they usually have an engine on the floor. And then both those guys are good complementary players. So very synergistic, very cohesive team.
Pick the words that exist.
Yeah, they're a good team. How's that?
Yeah, they're a very good team. The final thing I want to say is Mikal Bridges to me is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. I think he is just he's like such a great two-way player. He's someone where he's not asked to be a kind of a go-to option on offense, but there are nights where they kind of do that, and he can really be an effective player in that role. And when he's not, he's just like an efficiency monster, plus fantastic defender. But to me, what really changed is that Cam Johnson.
Yeah,
became a really, really, really good player. And that's what's not being talked about with the Suns going from being like one of the best teams in the league last year and making the finals to being the absolute best team. Is to me, it's Cam Johnson became a really good fucking player. And that's the thing, is like, he's someone that's an efficient 3-point shooter, good defender, doesn't fuck up. Like, he is perfect in the role that he is supposed to be in, and he's super elite at it. And that's what I think is so impressive about the Suns, is they don't have that top superstar, but all of the guys are elite in their role.
Yep.
And so it just turns into an elite team. I guess the final thing I want to ask you, James, what team does this remind you of?
Is that a leading question because you know what the answer is?
Well, I just want to know, we've talked about it, but I want you to put it on record. What team does this team remind you of?
Yeah, man, the 2016-17 Houston Rockets. It's crazy, honestly. Like, it's the same setup. You got a rim runner, rim protector at the 5, 2 defensive wings at the 4 and 3, and to boot, like good backup defensive wings, like a platoon of defensive wings. And then the backcourt is the offensive engine, and they're interchangeable. Only difference is, there's several differences, but Booker is a more interchangeable on-ball, off-ball player than Harden, but he's also just not as good. And right. So like that's where the difference comes in, I think. Like Paul and Booker, I think they kind of flip roles more seamlessly, because Harden doesn't really do that much for another guy when he has the ball, but he's so good with the ball that he makes up for that.